Declare open this public hearing of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Public Works into the proposed Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade proposed fit-out on new leased premises at 19 National Circuit, Barton. In accordance with the committee's resolution, this hearing will be broadcast on the Parliament's website and the proof and official transcripts of proceedings will be published on the Parliament's website. I must remind members of the media who may be present or listening on the web of the need to fairly and accurately report the proceedings of the committee. My name is Keith Pitt, I'm the Deputy Chair. I'll ask the other committee members to introduce themselves. South Australia.
Tony Zappia, Federal Member for Macon.
South Wales Senate.
Maria Kovacic, Senator for New South Wales.
And WA.
Tracy Roberts, Federal Member for Pearce, WA.
And in Tasmania.
Richard Colbeck, Senator for Tasmania.
Thank you very much. I now welcome representatives from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade to give evidence. For the Hansard record, would you please each state your full name and capacity in which you appear?
Thank you, Deputy Chair. My name is Suzanne Pitson. I am the Executive Director of the Overseas Property Office and I am DFAT's lead witness for today's hearing on the proposed fit-out of the new office accommodation premises at 19 National Circuit, Barton. As we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to all First Nations people, their culture and to their elders past, present and emerging. Thank you. Just to introduce the DFAT witnesses, will include Mr Simon Johnston, Assistant... sorry, if I could introduce the DFAT witnesses, thank you.
Mr Simon Johnston, Assistant Secretary, Diplomatic Security Division.
Ms DM Hetherington, Assistant Secretary, Overseas Property Office.
Mr Tim Fairbrother, Project Manager, Contract Administrator for Concha.
Paul Wilkin from TSA Riley, Tenant Advocate.
Ms Fiona Doherty, Director, Ryder Lavitt Bucknell, Quantity Surveyors.
Karen Clutson, Director, Cox Architecture, Department Designer.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, just before you go on, Ms Pitson, although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I should advise you that these hearings are formal proceedings of the Parliament. Consequently, they warrant the same respect as proceedings of the Parliament itself. Giving false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as contempt of Parliament. So, Ms Pitson, would you care to make some brief introductory remarks before we proceed to questions?
Thank you, Deputy Chair. I appreciate that. May I also, by way of introduction, acknowledge that Mr Peter Moore is a Director from the Overseas Property Office, is also online. Thank you. By way of introductory remarks, the primary aim of this project is to meet the security uplift requirements to consolidate expiring leases across 3 locations into fit-for-purpose fit-out and co-locate the DFAT Canberra workforce into a Barton campus and improve building sustainability outcomes. The scope includes a fit-out providing 19,828 square metres of office space to accommodate approximately 1,500 staff. None of the expiring Canberra leases occupied by DFAT provide sufficient secure facilities for DFAT operations, nor do they align with sustainability targets or modern work practices. DFAT is faced with managing an increased level of risk operating within the current buildings, or alternatively, undertaking significant, costly and disruptive security upgrades to meet changes to information use and storage prompted by recent amendments to the Protective Security Policy Framework, which is known as the PSPF, requirements. The proposed fit-out will address these issues. The estimated total budget for the project is $85.5 million. The project's construction will be managed by the developer and will encourage local industry participation in accordance with Commonwealth procurement requirements. Engagement with local stakeholders is occurring as required throughout the project's development and in part will also be managed by the developer. Internal DFAT consultation has already commenced with executives and staff, and additional information sessions and design briefs will be available to staff on a for information basis as the fit-out is further developed. Subject to parliamentary approval, construction is forecast to commence in February 2025 and is expected to be completed by September 2026. Staff are expected to occupy the building from early 2027. Deputy Chair, thank you for the opportunity to present. That concludes my opening statement. DFAT witnesses are ready to answer any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Ms Pitson. Mr Zappia, we'll go to you first.
Thank you, Deputy Chair, and thank you all for appearing before the committee. I do have some questions. My first one is, with respect to consultations with the staff, I don't want to know to the last detail, but generally, are staff supportive of the relocation into one central place?
Thank you, Mr Zappia. Yes, we have undertaken a consultation with staff. Consultation has been ongoing not only in the potential context of this project, but also in the context that DFAT has been named as an anchor tenant in the National Security Office precinct. Staff are well aware that we have 3 leases which are expiring in 2026-27, that the department is considering its future state, and there have been consultations with the Workplace Relations Committee. There have been notices going out to staff that this is an option that we are exploring. Generally, the feedback has been very positive. So yes, it's been quite well received.
Generally, the feedback's been positive. What kind of concerns, if any, have been raised?
So I think I'd have to take on the detail of the notice, but the concerns that we have always sought to address...
No, I want to know the concerns that have been raised.
Okay, so parking is a concern, yep. The facility for parking, and again, we're talking about the 19 National Circuit, but in the context of the National Security Office precinct, the existing parking that is used by a number of DFAT staff at York Park is being converted into that precinct. The Department of Finance is building a new parking requirement, new parking space near the John Gorton building, which will service the Barton precinct. But in terms of this proposal, collectively, with the expiring leases, there are around 297 car parks. The 19 National Circuit proposal, this proposal, will accommodate 251 car parks. So we think that we can address most of staff's needs and concerns around that car parking requirement. It's not quite a one-for-one, but it is very close.
Were there any other concerns raised?
I don't believe there were other concerns raised. I can absolutely take on notice if there has been any greater detail coming out of the consultations with the Workplace Relations Committee.
2 other questions. Will there be any other tenants in the building at 19 National Circuit?
No, Senate. No, Mr Zappia.
And thirdly, assuming the completion date is on schedule, you'll be able to vacate the other buildings, obviously. If the completion date extends beyond what you expect it right now, does that create a problem in terms of the fact that you might have to vacate the other 3 sites?
So that's an excellent question. So the completion dates of the 3 expiring leases, so we have 44 Sydney Avenue, yep, with a current completion date in 2026, so we will need to look to negotiate a short extension. We have 51 Alara Street in Civic, that also has an expiry date in 2026, so that's another landlord we will seek to negotiate with a small extension. The expiry date for 255 London Circuit is in 2027. We are anticipating that the 19 National Circuit will be complete by then. But you're absolutely right. We don't want to get ahead of our skis. We don't want to anticipate what the committee's outcome will be. We have started those conversations. We clearly haven't completed them, subject to the committee's approval.
No worries. Thank you, Deputy Chair.
Thanks, Mr Zappia. Ms Kovacic.
Thank you. My questions relate to, or the initial questions relate to the car parking spots that Mr Zappia has already heard some answers to. There are 48 fewer spots that have been noted across the new building versus the 3 currently leased buildings, and obviously that's prompted some feedback, has been noted from staff. What is the accessibility of the new building to public transport versus the old building? And I'm also particularly interested in why there are only 3 accessible car spots in the new build for a team of 1,500, with 1,400 effective FTE. 3 spots doesn't seem like a lot.
So in relation to the accessible spots, we will have the flexibility to allocate the additional flexible parking in the building once it comes out of the ground. So there will be additional accessibility spaces made available. In terms of public parking, that Barton is public transport. Barton is serviced by a bus network, and that there is that availability for people to get to Barton.
Okay, so is there any, what I'm trying to get at is, has anything effectively been done to look at what can be done in relation to the parking? Because obviously that's a significant decrease in parking, is there an expectation perhaps that, there's going to be, more remote work or continuing work from home? Do you expect that 1,400 number to stay static or to reduce?
So in terms of the overall footprint for parking in the Barton precinct, there is additional parking being constructed by the Department of Finance adjacent to the John Gorton building to service the Barton area as part of the National Security Office precinct, and that is also to accommodate DFAT staff within that hinterland. What we also have is an existing arrangement within DFAT, and I see no reason why this would change, is that obviously we're running a 24/7 operation. We run a ballot process every year to allocate parking. That will continue, but we also offer staff the flexibility that after 5 o'clock, or if they're working the shifts, if they're working on the Consular Crisis Centre, if they're working on a task force, they are available to take their vehicle and then park it under the building. They access it via their swipe card, so existing staff already have that flexibility. So we try to accommodate people so that they're not necessarily having to walk late at night. And you're right, the other aspect is that we also offer flexible and remote-based work for staff. And that is also an option that will also continue as well.
Yeah. Thank you. And that was actually going to be my last question, and you've sort of answered that there, was around the safety elements of team members actually walking in the dark at night at 11 p.m, midnight, whatever it is, to a car park that's being built off-site. Yeah.
Yes. So so it's an excellent question, and we're very mindful of that because we are running 24/7 operations, and that flexibility already exists. Staff, if they weren't successful in a ballot, they are still very much entitled to park their car, get their car while it's still light, and then park it under the building if they have to do that night shift work.
And there is sufficient space for everybody who needs to do that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all from me, Deputy Chair.
Thanks very much. Ms Roberts.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. My question is in relation to the scope of the project. Can you please provide further details on what measures will be included in the fit-out to ensure that it does align with the protective security policy framework? And also, is the close proximity to the hotel a concern?
Thank you, Ms Roberts. It's Simon Johnston, Assistant Secretary from Diplomatic Security. There are a number of threats that we've factored into this proposal. Generically, we look at the threat vectors of terrorism, espionage, civil disorder and crime. We've provided risk ratings against each of those and designed treatments appropriate for this structure. We take very much a layered approach to our security from the inside out, with obviously our most secure areas the most protected. When we look at the threat, we take advice from ASIO, and we look at the capability and the intent of the actors into the future and the evolving threat landscape. And we look at security to our people, to our infrastructure and to our information, and design threat mitigations around that. with the classification of this meeting, I'm happy to take either further comments in camera or at a secure location later.
Thank you for that response, and also thank you for the presentation. My other concern is in relation to the construction process. There's a significant amount of construction happening in Canberra at the moment. So do you see any risk that may delay the expected September 2026 construction completion period?
So that's an excellent question. I might pass to Mr Tim Fairbrother. You're absolutely right. There is a lot of construction in Canberra, and sometimes it feels like we're all competing for the same resources. But Mr Fairbrother, would you like to take that question, please?
Yep, no problem. Thank you, Ms Roberts. In our discussions with the developer, we've had very positive discussions with them, indicating that they don't have any concerns about market capacity for this construction, and they're confident that the program can be met based on their experience and knowledge of the market. And they're the best judge of the market and how it will be placed over the next few years. We also have our independent advice from the project management team and the quantity surveyor team, who also have their finger on the market and can provide that alternative view to DFAT to give them confidence about the capacity of the market. Yep, sorry.
Yeah, and I guess a subsequent question to is that if there is a delay, what are the interim measures that we put in place to accommodate the staff at the current office spaces given it expires in between 26 and 27?
Sorry, that wasn't.
Would you like me to answer that?
Okay, you get the question.
The first issue, I think, to cover that is in the agreement for lease. The agreement for lease has very defined damages against the developer should there be a delay, and those costs in damages include extensions of leases, fit-outs, etc., that would be necessary to accommodate the staff should there be a delay. There are also other...
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Any further questions? Tracy, you all right?
No, I think I cut the response off halfway then, so if you want to see subsequent response, happy to, but no further questions from my point. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Mr Colbeck.
Given you're running a 24-hour operation, what's your workforce to desk ratio? How is that fitting out? And how do you cycle people through that process? Is it I don't think we're supposed to use the term hot desk anymore, but flexible desking operation? And how are the workforce accommodated in that sense?
So that's an excellent question, and in answering that, I might also seek to better elaborate on Mr Zappier's earlier question too, in terms of raising concerns, any other concerns around staff. So at the moment, DFAT is running a 1-to-1 desk ratio in most of its leased estate. We're running a much tighter ratio at 51 Alara Street. They are working fully flexibly, but part of this reflects the fact that some of the fit-outs we have in the DFAT Canberra property portfolio are nearly 20 years old. So what you see is also very inefficient floor plates, but very inefficient use of space. And you see in some parts of DFAT, we're still running lots of offices and cubicles, which is very 1995. And in other parts of DFAT, the more recent accommodations, so 51 Alara, which came on board in 2020, it's running those flexible workspaces. So it's different. The answer, I can't specifically answer your question because it's different in each of the leases, and sometimes it's different on each of the floors. So some floors, so 255 London Circuit, for example, we're running very sort of straight desks, sit-stand desks, sort of flexible work arrangement on the 5th floor. You go to a different floor in 255 London Circuit, they're still in sort of the cubicle and office accommodation arrangement. This will also, there's two aspects then that I would say. In the secure spaces, and Mr Johnston might like to say more about this perhaps in the in-camera session, we tend to run one-to-one, and there are considerations around running that. So if it is a higher security zone, you tend to run a one-to-one. But to the other point that Mr Zapier raised, what were the other concerns that staff had raised, goes to some directors have raised concerns that they will lose their offices. So this is directors at an EL2 level, that they will lose their office. That has been raised as a concern. There has been a desire to keep those offices, but I would note that the removal of EL2 offices actually is in keeping with the cross-government department directives. What we seek to do in these situations is actually provide a lot more meeting room, quiet spaces where directors can still go, and that people can meet and collaborate, because we also recognise that certainly at the director level, people are often having very sensitive conversations, workplace relations conversations, staff conversations, people conversations. So ensuring that we still have sufficient spaces for people to do that, but by and large, and also ensuring that if somebody is working on something secure, they are doing it in an appropriate space and that they're not out on the floor, and it's not just open for everybody to be able to see over their shoulder what they're working on. But that's a long way to answer your question, Senator, and Mr Zapier, but is there anything you wanted to you can say in this forum regarding...
The only thing I'd value add in this forum, I think, is that we do very much work on the need to know principle. We work with people working in spaces that are appropriate to the security settings and the work that they're working on. But quite often people need, and we try to maximise the livability, I suppose, of our staff in terms of you don't put them into a more secure area if you don't need them working in that area all the time, because it does bring with it certain restrictions. So what we have built into this is the ability for those teams to temporarily access secure areas, and that also enhances our security posture, but is very clear then about what you can talk about, what you can work on in what areas, and significantly enhances our current settings.
So in the context of supporting the individuals with the flexible desking arrangements, what provisions are being provided to cater for that?
So, Ms.
Thank you. I'll take that question. The design that we have developed for DFAT integrates all of the findings and the best practice we have around wellness, inclusivity and the diversity of staff that now occupy contemporary office environments. We have addressed, as Mr Johnston outlined, how security needs to occur, how the security requirements are provided within the spaces. But in the general workplace, we considered what is needed in terms of flexibility, the wider arrangement of amenity that was being discussed around quiet rooms, wellness facilities such as carers rooms, all of those areas around multi-use spaces, but we've also provided a high proportion of quiet rooms, VC facilities, breakout, storage, everything that one would expect for a contemporary workplace, this DFAT project provides. And it provides it in a way that's set up for the future. An organisation does change and flex, and the way that we've approached that design is to ensure that DFAT's needs today are what they are, but if in 5 years they need to evolve those, that fit-out is configured to provide the very best choice for staff and equitable distribution across each of the floor areas, across each of the elements of the building. Thank you.
So in terms of storage, you mean lockers for each individual?
Yes, so we have a high proportion of lockers and they are distributed for use. The building also comes with a really well-provisioned end-of-trip facility, so we have lockers there also for the diverse ways that staff may access the building, whether that's cycling or walking. The building provides for storage in those areas, as well as expanded areas of storage for teams or any of those other unique needs that each of those teams within the building will need.
So you talked about the evolution of the workspace. What's your life cycle design in respect of what you've done, or you're proposing to do?
We are seeking, where we can, to look at 15 years for all componentry. So when we look at desks and elements we put within it, we look for the very longest life cycle. So at the moment it's 15 years, and we do that when we look at built form. It's about multi-purpose use. So we don't provide one space that can only do one outcome. We look to see it can evolve throughout the duration of the project. And when we look at materiality and all of those aspects, excluding technology, that will move on before the 15 years. But those base building, those fit-out elements, we look to try and achieve 15 years in all aspects. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Mr. Kovacic with a follow-up.
Thank you. My follow-up question relates to the desire to keep officers from the L2 levels, the directors, and particularly around the sensitive nature, obviously, of the department in particular of DFAT, but also of that level. Can I ask why their concerns and desire to keep the officers wasn't considered? Like, if obviously they're some of your most senior people who've said this is something that we need, why are we actually directing them to go book a meeting room?
So so currently there is a directive across government that, and it's generally best practice, that directors are not accommodated in offices. What we are seeking to do, however, is ensure that we're looking at the function, not the individual's personal seniority, but the function that person is performing, and ensuring that we are providing an appropriate space for that function to be performed. So if I could just take an example, there absolutely, and this is just an example, there will be offices for example, if you need, in relation to medical staff or psychologists or people who need to review, the offices available for people who need to review sensitive material or undertaking sensitive conversations. We're not saying that capability is not going to be available. We're saying that there's not an automatic entitlement just based on your seniority in the department. We're looking at what functionality is required. We're looking to service that functionality. And we are actually also looking to create greater equity amongst the director cohort, because quite frankly, only about 45% of our director cohort are currently accommodated, because what you've seen is this growing up and different workspaces being created over the last 15, 20 years. So it will actually contribute to equity, and we still think that we will absolutely focused on providing the appropriate space. So whether that space is for sensitive conversations or to review sensitive material, or to have those sensitive meetings and discussions, all of that will still be available.
Thank you. I guess my question wasn't around the hierarchy piece. It was around the nature of the work connected to the hierarchy. So we're talking about, special elements to this building based on the nature of the work that is done, and, security uplift as an example. So my concern is, I want to ensure that we're actually creating something that is fit for purpose, and we're actually not creating a workspace that, is inclusive, which is important, and equitable, but actually doesn't meet the primary function of secure conversations when they're necessary.
Absolutely. We're very conscious of that. Mr. Johnson.
Absolutely, Senator. In our discussions with the various divisions, and we've met with almost every division in the department now, one of the key elements that was highlighted by the divisions was the lack of small group meeting rooms and the ability to conduct meeting rooms on a need-to-know basis. And that's really what's been highlighted in this, and what you're highlighting, I think, as well, is that it's not necessarily about the rank or the position of the person. It's the ability to conduct those meetings in secure facilities or in secure areas that not everyone else needs to listen to, that we can compartmentalise or just stop annoying other people who don't need to listen to it in that sense. But it's very much a security focus in that environment, and we've built more rooms, more meeting rooms that allow more levels of the entire department to work across that secure environment.
If I could just add one more thing to this. This building and the briefing requirements and the scoping requirements for this building has been very much informed by, we've been in consultation with staff and divisions for a lot longer, actually, because of the DFAT being named as an anchor tenant in the National Security Office precinct. So we've been scoping this and getting a deep understanding of what the requirements are for a couple of years now. We've absolutely made sure that it's been incorporated into the briefing for the for 19 National Circuit project.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Deputy Chair.
Thanks very much. Just a couple from me. For want of a better description, critical incident response rooms, are there any shifting from your existing facilities to the new ones?
Thank you, Mr Pratt. In terms of critical incident response rooms, I might take that off camera if that's possible.
Yep, that's no problems at all. We can do that in the next session. Committee members, any further questions? Going once.
Keith, it's Tony Zappia. Just one other question. Are staff allowed to work from home?
Yes, there is. Yes, there is entitlements within the existing framework to apply for working from home, and that will be considered on a case-by-case basis. There is a process by which of approval to go through. One of the overriding considerations is the nature of the work that they're doing. If they are working on sensitive material or secure material, clearly you can't do that at the kitchen table. If you're looking to have conversations of a certain nature, you can't do that in your workplace. So there are existing working from home arrangements, but it absolutely needs to be considered in that operational context.
It was because of those very concerns about security that I asked the question.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you. Thanks, Keith.
Thank you. Any other questions, committee members? All right, given there are no further questions, can I thank you for your attendance here today. You'll be sent a copy of the transcript to make any corrections to the transcription. If you've taken any questions on notice during today's proceedings, you're requested to provide a response by 5 p.m. on Tuesday the 19th of November 2024 to allow the committee to efficiently conclude its inquiry. And I declare this public hearing now closed.